Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I try and share stories of how technology is transforming our world, even in places that you don't expect and don't think about. For example, if you went for a new job, you got the interview, you got the role, but it was all based on a background check. How does that background check take place? What technology will determine if you get that job role or not? Well, since 2013, Good Hire has been a trusted background check partner to more than 100,000 organisations. And with its innovative technology, I wanted to learn more about that tech and how it has enabled the company to redefine the background check service industry. So we're going to discuss automation, advanced data engineering, and how it's helping business accelerate hiring and enable them to make more confident hiring decisions. Well, they are headquartered in Silicon Valley, and Good Hire is also owned and operated by a company called Inflection. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US so we can find out more about the story behind Good Hire and uncover some of the trends and learn more about the technology that's empowering background checks. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. I'm Max Wesman. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Inflection. We are a company based out in Silicon Valley, but really now, thanks to COVID, we're based all over the world. And our mission is to build trust by harnessing the power of data. I'd love to tell you a little bit more about that, but that is our big mission as a company. And I live in Northern California, and I'm a father of two.
And before we go there and start learning more about harnessing big data, I've got to ask, what's your origin story? Where did your passion for tech come from? And what was it that put you on this path you're on today? I feel there's got to be a story there, right?
Yeah, there certainly is. So I grew up in San Francisco, really around the first dot-com boom. And so I've always been around technology and entrepreneurialism, and it's always been really exciting to me. And so even in middle school and in elementary school, I started getting interested in computers, and I actually started coding in elementary school and building computers. And so that really started the path for me towards wanting to figure out how I could build a career in technology eventually. And it led me into doing some management consulting for some large tech, media, and telecom companies. And then eventually during business school at UC Berkeley, I discovered product management as this magical way for me to take my love of technology and my interest in business and helping customers by building something really tangible. And that's what led me to some big companies like Microsoft and HP, and then eventually to where I am today. But it's just been this passion for technology and how I can bring it to life that comes from my early days in the Bay Area.
And your passion and everything that you've built put you on this path that led you to Inflection. And if we go back to 2006, during the earliest days of the big data era, Inflection was, I believe, founded to address three emerging trends. So can you expand on the story behind Inflection and what those three trends were?
Sure. So Inflection was founded by two brothers, Matthew and Brian Monahan, and they founded the company at a really interesting turning point or inflection point, if you will, that was a lot of data that had been previously held offline in record files and in phone books even was starting to become digitized and coming online. And this really presented a great opportunity as well as a challenge. The opportunity obviously was to how do you get access to all of this data in a faster, more streamlined way, but also how do you deal with the growing privacy implications of all this personal information now being much more easily available. You don't have to go to a courthouse and stand in line or get a special order. You can actually access this data online. And so the idea behind Inflection was how do we create a path for both businesses and initially really consumers to get access to this information and do so in a privacy-centric way that allows people to really create value off of this data. And all sorts of really interesting use cases came about from that, including a historical people data business called archives.com, where you could create a family tree using online records, as well as a current data business called PeopleSmart, where you can look up people's contact information, find out more public records about them, and kind of all sorts of really interesting use cases were expanded out of those origins.
And I think I should point out that Inflection is, of course, the parent company of the employment background screening company called Good Hire. And that's one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today to talk about that. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about Good Hire and who uses it, just to completely set the scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story behind Good Hire is about 6 years after Inflection was founded. The idea behind Good Hire came through this concept of, hey, we've got all this great data that we've now aggregated, but there's got to be other use cases that this data can be applied to. And one of them is background screening, particularly for candidates looking for new jobs. And so I joined the company and was given the challenge of how do we take this information and help out businesses who need to run background checks, but maybe don't know how to do it. And so the concept behind Good Hire was help small businesses who've never run a background check very quickly understand what is a background check, what are all the compliance requirements, what are the really core set of packages you need, and then very easily and intuitively create an experience for these small businesses to start running background checks in as little as a few hours, and do so in a way that, again, keeps compliance, customer experience, and the overall user experience at the heart of the product. And that's something that started off as really a small initiative and has now grown into a really big part of our business and is really now the main business of Inflection.
And one of the things that put you guys on my radar was when Good Hire recently released predictions for background check screening in a report there. But for people listening and hearing about it for the first time, can you expand on that and the key findings in that report?
Yeah, so a lot of kind of now the 8-9 years of experience we've had in background screening has led us to some interesting viewpoints as to where screening is going in the future. And what I've found from being really in the driver's seat of driving this business is that what's going to be key going forward is automation. And how do you take there continues to be some levels of manual efforts required to complete a background check, and how do you add modern technology and AI and machine learning and all those cool buzzwords, but actually use them to make the background screening process faster, more efficient, and frankly, more fair for those who are going through it. And there's a lot of really interesting developments that are coming to fruition in the last couple of years and going forward that are going to make this process even easier and allow background screening to get interwoven into many more types of interactions, not just within employment, but outside of employment. And so that's something that's really exciting for us and we see continuing to develop. Also, with the emergence of COVID, obviously remote work is something that has become really the new reality. And the importance of background checks has actually increased because now you're not meeting people really face-to-face anymore. And so this idea of how do you build trust with someone that you don't get to meet in person? Well, background screening is a really good way to do that, to start to get a better sense of who they are and where they've come from. And if they've had some challenges in the past, how have they learned from them and how do you move forward? And in addition, we've also seen that legislation continues to really mold how background screening is used and how fairness continues to get injected into the hiring process. And so it's something that we're keeping a close eye on because every day there's a new change in law, not just at the national level, but at the local state level that's influencing how we can get access to data. Is certain data being redacted? So what are other means that we have to use in order to get that data to correctly match a person to their record. So it's an ever evolving, but still really exciting industry. And it's one that, again, continues to be really important with the emergence of remote work and the idea that you really do need to figure out an efficient way to trust who you're working with or interacting with.
And I'm curious, when you're looking at those predictions and also seeing firsthand at how everything is evolving in real time and at rapid speed as well, is there anything that surprises you there?
Not really. I find that background screening, even compared to some other industries, is even a little bit slower in terms of its evolution. And so anytime there's a big jump in terms of technology innovation or the ways in which we look at a problem, again, being in Silicon Valley, I'm used to all sorts of fast innovators coming up with new ways of doing things. And so I actually think the background screening industry could be moving even faster. And so all of these emerging innovations and technologies are things that I'm not surprised by. And frankly, I'm excited for an acceleration in terms of some of these developments.
And are there any particular tech trends in the industry that are exciting you at the moment that you could see reshaping how we do background screening?
Yeah, for many years now, the idea of blockchain revolutionizing background checks has been out there. And we've been following it for a while because from the start, the idea that you could decentralize where personal information is stored and make it more of a personal asset. I think that's something that's really interesting, particularly for background checking. And also within this new economy, particularly the gig economy, where people are jumping from job to job. And the idea that potentially you could really own your identity stored on the blockchain. And it's something that, while elements of it change, like your criminal history may change, but where you went to school, where you've worked in the past, those are records that should be somewhat permanent. And they should be able to live with you and go with you from job to job. And so I think the excitement around Web3 and particularly blockchain technology is something that is certainly going to impact the background screening and really the overall identity world in the not too distant future. We've just been waiting for the adoption of that technology to take hold. And it seems like the back half of last year and going into 2022, we're starting to get to that point where I think it's actually going to make a real impact.
And for any business leaders listening, how would you say, if we were to compare how they perform background screening right here, right now, to how they will in the next few years? Are there any big changes that you think that they need to prepare for and how it will become easier with less friction?
Yeah, well, one of the other trends that we've generally seen is that in the past, you typically ran a background check before you hired someone or before you began a transaction with someone. And you did that really one time because it was a fairly costly as well as time-intensive process to run a background check. But what we're seeing now, and again, a lot of this has come from the emergence of the gig economy, is this idea of continuously establishing and reestablishing trust. And so the idea of ongoing screening and your background check actually evolving and moving with you is something that I see coming about. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that data is now so much more readily available. It's much easier and cost-effective to access. And so this idea of a one-time background check should start to, I think, merge into more of a continuous background check and a continuous, essentially, re-credentialing of someone. And that's a process that I see really evolving, not just in the gig economy, but into larger, more traditional businesses as well. And I think it's really exciting. And it's something that also will move background checking into more of a subscription or an ongoing service, if you will.
And what about yourselves at Good Hire? What's next for you and what you're going to be focusing on here in 2022? Is there anything you can share there?
Yeah, we've got all sorts of things that we're focusing on. And now that we've been around for over 8 years and we've got a lot of customers, we have over 40,000 businesses that are working with us. We've got a whole long list of things that our customers are asking for. And really our focus continues to be on those customers and how can we resolve their pain points. Typically, it's focused on speed. How can we get them back their background checks as quickly, efficiently, and also compliantly as possible? And so a lot of our investment is in new technologies and ways to, as I said before, automate access to data, particularly data that has traditionally been hard to get. You have to actually send a person to a courthouse to physically retrieve that data. We're looking at new ways to get access to that data electronically that'll speed up the process and make it much more efficient. Because at the end of the day, for our customers, if they want to bring someone into their business to help them grow, they really need that background check to be done and to kind of check that box and then move on. And so as their partner, we need to enable them to do that. And so that's really where a lot of our focus is. And then also just generally making sure that we're on top of all these technology trends I talked about, looking to things like how we can leverage blockchain, how we can continue to add additional levels of fairness into our process. So there's work that we continue to do around how do we make the candidate experience as open and transparent as possible so that candidates know where they stand with employers and can have that dialogue and get past any past issues that they potentially have on their background check. So these are some of our many focuses, including actually expanding beyond just the US. We've got a lot of customers who need our services outside the US. And so that's another area of focus is around our international services as well.
Well, something I always try and do on this podcast is try and learn more about areas in business that are being transformed by technology that people don't think about it. And I would imagine that background screening is one of those areas. So thank you so much for bringing that topic to life today and learned so much. And I'd love to get you back on in the future and see how that's continuing to evolve. But before I let you go, I always like to have a little bit of fun with my guests. We began the podcast talking about your origin story, how you got here today. But I'm now going to ask you, what was the soundtrack to your story? Is there a particular song that has inspired you or accompanied you on your journey? And we'll add it to our Spotify playlist. So what would your song be and why?
That's a good question. Well, if you ask me today, I have to listen to a lot of kids' music, so a lot of Coco Melon and the Wiggles. But in college, I expanded my musical repertoire. Growing up, I was a child of the 90s. I listened to a lot of grunge. But in college, I expanded to some electronic music, and I found RJD2, and particularly the song Ghostwriter, as a really great song to both study to and work to. And it's one I keep coming back to as both a way to calm me down, but also at the same time motivate me, because I can't help but move my feet whenever I listen to the beat. So I'd say RJD2 Ghostwriter is my motivational song, if you will.
Oh, man, I don't know that one. It sounds great. I'm going to add that to the playlist. I'll be listening to
you should.
It. Yeah, and I'll be listening to that as soon as we finish today. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about Good Hire, any of the topics we talked about today, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point?
Yeah, definitely come and visit our website, goodhire.com, or our parent company, inflection.com. And there's all sorts of ways to connect with us there. You can also connect with me individually on LinkedIn, Max Wesman. I'm easy to find and happy to answer any questions and be of service as best I can.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you the best of luck for the future. I've really enjoyed learning more about your story today and the great work you're doing. And you've certainly taught me a thing or two about background screening as well. But thank you for sharing all that with me today.
Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Fascinating stuff there around how Good Hire is predicting automation, remote work, new legislation and data privacy demands will all impact screening and hiring in 2022. And it certainly got me thinking about all that technology that's going on under the hood when just having a simple background check. But over to you. If you know anything about this world, if this is something that you know a lot about too, please, I invite you to share your stories, insights, expertise, ask questions, come on the show, work with me, whatever it may be. Email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes, and my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. And please don't forget to rate and review the show if you enjoy it. If you didn't enjoy it, maybe don't leave a review. Only joking. Please, I invite you all to join me again tomorrow. We'll do it all again. But thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.